Network. Derek Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis hanging with you. Excited to have our next guest on. First time on the program. He is Ian Cummings. You could follow him on Twitter at @IC_draft. He is an NFL draft analyst for PFN 365. Ian, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you on.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. A week
Ian, what's going on?
From the draft.
What's up, man?
Ian, you got to be like us, right? I mean, you're just pouring through film and everything else, and you probably can't wait for this week to get here. I'm because we're talked out. There's nothing else we can discuss at this point, man.
For real. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
The entire cycle is spent, kind of going through all the different possibilities. And then the draft comes along and something that you didn't expect ends up happening. So it's just the way it is, man. But actually, most of the work is already done at this point. You want to do the groundwork in advance so that you can start thinking about the different possibilities. But it's fun, man. It's been a grind, but hey, it's what we signed up for. So it's the best time of year.
Amen. Amen. All right, well, let's start. The Eagles sit there at 10-30, and we know Howie Roseman's aggressive. That much we know. So a trade is certainly very much in play. But let's just say it sort of goes as we think the board might go, and there's not that guy that falls, which, maybe Jalen Carter, maybe somebody like that. What do you think a good pick for the Eagles would be at 10 or getting ahead of Howie Roseman? What do you think he may do at 10?
Yeah, it's a tough call because it really does, like you said, it depends on how the board falls, right? Defensive line is the first one that comes to mind for me with the Eagles. They have a lot of guys up in contract years next year. They have a need for young talent, and that's where the value of the board stacks up for them. I know Lucas Van Ness from Iowa is a potential pick there, maybe Miles Murphy from Clemson, but there's value later on too, at pick 30, or if they wanted to trade down. I know they have a gap between their 94th pick. They don't have another pick until out of the top 200, right? So a lot of the value in this class as well is kind of in that 100 to 200 range. So if you want to stack up the depth there, maybe a trade down is possible. But I think it depends on who's there. Lucas Van Ness would be a great pick from Iowa. He's around 6'5", 272, 34-inch arms, insane athlete, very good power capacity, but he's very good at acquiring leverage for his frame too. Murphy would be a good pick, 6'5", 269, ran a 4.51 40-yard dash at his pro day. So another insane athlete who's got very, hyperactive athleticism for his size, very good foot speed. Those guys are the ones that stand out to me. You want powerful guys who have the traits to mold in the years to come when your veterans are going to be off down the line, But I think at number 32, the value is there. Adetomiwa Adebawore from Northwestern is one guy who I know has been comped to Brandon Graham a little bit, 6'2", 282, near 34-inch arms, run a 4.49, so another crazy athlete. Defensive line, I think, is where you have to focus on. If Van Ness is there at 10, if Miles Murphy is there at 10, those are phenomenal picks for you. If they're not there, maybe you trade down a little bit, get some value, and target a guy at number 30. But I think the bottom line is, if you are the Eagles, you have options, and that's a great thing for you.
Hey, Ian, when you look at all the names that have been consistently associated with the top 10 in the draft this year, who's the one player that you think might fall out of that top 10, depending, because as we know, after the first two picks, nothing will make sense when it comes to the draft. Everything is like wow factor after that, whether it's trade, team taking a player you didn't even think they were going to take. Who do you think is one of the top names that could somehow slip out of that top 10?
Yeah, again, it's tough, man. And I hate, as a draft analyst, I always get caught sitting on the fence, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. It's a tough habit to break, but that's just the nature of the business. But I would say, the offensive tackle group, I'm curious to see who goes first out of that group. Paris Johnson Jr. is often mocked as the first tackle, 6'6", 313 pounds, 36-inch arms. He's got the highest ceiling in this class, in my opinion. But I do think there's no consensus OT1. So some teams might have a different opinion. You look at the Bears at number 9, they have a need at natural right tackle. So maybe they want Darnell Wright from Tennessee, and then Paris Johnson falls. Christian Gonzalez is another one who could fall maybe just by virtue of the board. He's my CB1. He's a top 10 prospect for me. But if he does fall, it could just be a nature of positional value. We know there's 4 quarterbacks up there, a lot of intriguing defensive line prospects too. So those are the ones that come to mind for me. I think those positions in particular, where there's no consensus number 1, maybe one of the guys that has more hype in the media falls and becomes a value deal for a team.
I'm huge with, the Eagles going in the trenches, whether it be defensive line, offensive line. My pick, I'll probably go Nolan Smith, just because you have that type of athlete on the side with Hassan Reddick. But this city seems to be split in half in the love affair for Bijan Robinson, the running back. Is there any chance you think that I'm thinking he's not even going to make it to the 10th pick? I'm thinking he's going to get drafted before then. But even if he is, the Eagles picking him at number 10, do you see any value in the Eagles doing that?
It's tough, man, because he is as good as advertised. That's the tough part with the running back position. Running backs, are naturally more dependent on what's happening in front of them. That said, Bijan is a top 5 prospect, regardless of positional value. Like, if we're not accounting for positional value, which you are going to if you're in the NFL draft, if you're a general manager, it's going to be something you take into account. But, taking it out of the equation, Bijan is up there in that blue chip range. He is a phenomenal running back prospect. 5'11", 215. He's got workhorse size, but then he's got the short area, change of direction, the lateral agility, the bend of a scat back, right? And then he's a phenomenal receiving back.
Balance.
Great balance, uncanny creative instincts in short spaces. So, the hype is legit with this guy. It's not hyperbole. He is that good. The question with the Eagles is, are you willing to take that luxury? Because the Eagles were just in the Super Bowl, but as you mentioned, they do have a lot of upcoming needs in the trenches, and you do not want to neglect the trenches. That's an area that you want to stay investing in, and especially with Jordan Davis, right? You want to make that investment count. So get guys who can play off of him, right? So I wouldn't neglect it. If I'm the Eagles GM, I'm leaning away from running back, especially when, as much as I love Bijan, this running back class is very, very deep. You could get a guy on day 2, maybe even early day 3, who could be a contributor. And you did sign Rashad Penny. Now, he's struggled to stay healthy, but, on a buy low deal, maybe that could provide value for you. So I usually lean away. I lean toward the positional value, especially when you have so many needs on the defensive line coming up. But, you can't rule out Bijan because he is so good, and he can be a dynamic weapon, especially alongside Jalen Hurts. Seeing him and Hurts in the same backfield, that would be a scary sight.
Let me ask you, do you worry, and I heard Brian Baldinger talking about this today, so I'll give him the props on this, but he brought up 2 games in particular this past year. I know it's kind of cherry picking because the other games he was almost just dominant, but Alabama and TCU, probably the 2 best teams that they played. 21 rushes, 57 yards, 2.7 yards per carry against Bama, 12 for 29, 2.4 against TCU. Does that concern you at all at the next level, that against the real heavyweights that he didn't exactly crush?
It's something to take into account for sure. I think anytime, for me, it's a case-by-case thing with every rep as well. There's some 1-yard runs where he created, it was going to be a negative 3-yard run, and then he created 4 yards. Some others, maybe he's dancing around a little too much. So it's something you take case by case. It doesn't concern me too much. The Texas offensive line was never a great blocking unit for him. I think they improved a little bit in 2022, but still really streaky. The onus was on Robinson a lot to create for himself. Naturally, when you do have that much pressure on you as a playmaker, there's going to be some volatility from week to week. But I think overall the production profile is very sound. I just look at it, case by case. Is he creating behind the line when he encounters contact early? And by and large, he is. There are some things that you can clean up, but very, very solid, and much more solid than your average running back prospect.
Hey, Ian, give me your perspective on, to me, 2 of the more intriguing quarterback prospects in this draft: Hendon Hooker and Anthony Richardson. We keep seeing them yo-yo up and down these mock draft boards in terms of where they fall. What is your perspective on who takes a bite on these guys?
Yeah, no, I think they're a little split for me. I'm a big fan of Richardson and the upside that he has. He's in my, he's in my top QB group. I got CJ Stroud, Richardson, and Bryce Young just clustered together at the top of the board. But so with Richardson, it's just, the upside is truly unmatched. We've never seen a ceiling like this. And again, it sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. 6'4", 244 pounds. The dude is built like a tank. He ran a 4.43, 40.5-inch vertical. He's got a cannon for a right arm, and he can adjust his arm angles too. So he's got that elasticity that you'd like to see. He's only got 13 starts under his belt, and he can improve his mechanics, his accuracy for sure, still growing in that respect. But whenever you have a young quarterback who doesn't have a ton of experience, you want to see flashes of growth. You want to see, little hints that shows that he can handle it, right? You look at the pocket navigation that he showed in 2022. I think that's a very strong trait of his that kind of goes overlooked. He can extend plays in the pocket. He can keep his eyes up, and he's shown that he can anticipate over the middle of the field. So combining those things with his natural talent, that's an investment that I'm willing to make in the top 10. Hendon Hooker, a little bit lower on my board. I have an early day 3. I would take him late day 2 for positional value, but 25-year-old rookie, right? And the age alone is not a concern. What concerns me more is the offense that he's coming from. That Tennessee offense was heavily predicated on spacing, stacked alignments and one-read throws where he's not really going through progressions, not having to process. There was a lot less on his plate on a down-to-down basis. And when he did need to go through multiple progressions, a lot of times he'll drop his eyes or he'll just tuck and run, right? And I don't think he has the elite level of tools to compensate for that, where I'm saying, hey, I at least want to invest. He's got good tools, don't get me wrong. He's a good athlete. He's got a good arm, but he's not at that elite level. And being 25 years old as a rookie, I'm a little concerned he might be set in his ways. maybe stagnated from a growth perspective. Maybe what you see is what you get. Whereas with Richardson, he's still got so much more room to improve. So that's where I'm at with those guys. Hooker, the first round talk is a little rich for me, but with Richardson, I can't see appeal.
Well, what about Will Levis
Oh,
then?
go ahead, babe. Go ahead.
How about Will Levis then? You know, where do you sit him at?
Yeah, that's another tough one. I think Levis has more talent than Hooker. You know, I think Hooker's a little bit twitchier as an athlete in the pocket, but I think Levis's arm is legit. You know, it's up there with the top of the class. He can generate elite levels of velocity, and he can adjust his arm angles very well. I mean, not just laterally, but, you know, vertically, he's got very, very elastic arm. The question with Levis is, you know, again, 24-year-old rookie, so kind of a similar conversation. He never had a ton of stability at Kentucky, and I think that's one of the differences between him and Hooker. Hooker was in a very quarterback-friendly offense with Josh Heupel. Levis, you know, had some talent leave him. You know, the offensive line wasn't great. And again, you don't want to make constant excuses for the guy. He didn't show the linear growth that he needed to show in 2022, and that's why he's a little bit lower for me. I have that top 3 at the top. Levis is my QB4, but there's a decent gap between them. I would still, you know, be willing, and I can see the reasoning for taking him in round 1 because he does have the talent. I think it's ultimately up to QB, you know, coaches and evaluators to get in a room with him and kind of dissect his mental game and say, like, hey, we know that you didn't have the stability necessary to sustain growth, but, you know, what are we working with from a mental perspective? Does he have it? You know, can he grow? Like, that's one thing I look at with Richardson. It seems like he does, you know, looking at the flashes on tape. You don't see as many flashes with Levis. You know, his internal clock can be a little slow. He's not great at processing the middle of the field. His trigger can be late at times. Those things concern me, but the talent is a tier above Hooker. You know, I do think that, you know, his offense kind of put a little more pressure on him, which is why I'm willing to give him a little bit more benefit of the doubt. But, you know, that top 3 at the top is separated for me. And then after that, the uncertainty compounds a little bit.
And where are you at with Peter Skoratsky? He's another guy that's been rumored to be an Eagle. You know, and there are some that project him because of the shorter arms to be a guard at the NFL level. Is he worthy of 10, or is that someone, if the Eagles traded down for, would make more sense?
Yeah, I don't think he's quite worthy of 10, in my opinion. Now, I can see the reasoning behind it. I would rather trade down, or if he's there at 30, which is probably wishful thinking, right? But, you know, somewhere in the mid to late first. I've grown on him over the course of the cycle. 6'4", 315. The arm length is a concern, and I do think he has very good hand usage. And whenever a guy has, you know, less than average arm length, you want to see if they can counteract it with proper hand usage. And he does have good hand usage. I don't think he's quite elite in that category. Occasionally his hands will be too wide and he'll let defensive linemen get inside his frame. I don't like seeing him do that. I want him to try and stay tighter on a more consistent basis, but he's got phenomenal footwork. I mean, some of the best footwork in the class. He's so good at staying leveraged. He's a phenomenal athlete as well. He's very strong in his core, and he's very good at staying square with opponents and not giving up leverage. And so those things for me, you know, I do think he has a very, very stable foundation. Wherever you want to play him, whether it's at tackle, you know, let him refine his hands a little bit more. You know, again, he's got very good, not quite elite to the level where I'd say he can consistently counteract it against longer, more athletic NFL defensive linemen. But play him at guard, play him at tackle. I think you're looking at a high floor player with a pretty high ceiling, you know, even in spite of the arm length. Just, you know, there's a little bit too much in the way of, you know, his hands being too wide for me to say that I would take him at 10, but mid to late first round, I can definitely see the appeal.
Who do you think will be the first cornerback off the board? Because I'm torn between Witherspoon and Gonzalez.
I'm torn too, man. I wish I could make a definitive statement. My CB1 is Gonzalez, and whenever they're that close, I tend to lean toward the physical tools, and Gonzalez has the tools, man. I mean, he's around 6'1", 232-inch arms, ran a 4.38, had a 41.5-inch vertical. I mean, and this is a guy who came into the season with all of the natural talent, right? Early on against Georgia, especially, he took his lumps a little bit, but over the course of the year, you saw him progress and you saw him add more to his game. And by the end of the year, man, his technique, his off-man technique, matching guys off the line, the recovery speed to match and blanket receivers downhill, and then the instincts, the anticipation and coverage, the ability to, you know, read the quarterback's eyes and swoop in front of passes and then make the play at the catch point. You know, in my opinion, when you have that talent and when you see him progress like that over the course of a season, that's all I need to see to say, hey, let's keep that trajectory going. Let's keep him trending up, right? So I love Devin Witherspoon too. I mean, the guy plays with a massive chip on his shoulder. He's so physical. He's so competitive. He's like a gnat in coverage. He gets in your grill and he stays there. But when it's that close, I tend to lean towards the superior physical tools. And Witherspoon is no slouch. He's got good speed. He's got good burst. But Gonzalez is a different animal. He's got all pro potential.
When you look at this draft, I think there's like 3 elite level tight ends in this draft. Guys can come in day one and make a difference. That's Michael Mayer from Notre Dame.
Yep.
Darnell Washington from Georgia. Then you got Dalton Kincaid from Utah. Where do you see those guys stacking in? Because I see them late in the first, but first rounders, no doubt.
Yeah, I could see one or two going in the first round for sure. Tight end is always tricky. Again, positional value, but those guys are very good. Darnell Washington is a little bit lower on my board. I'm a big fan of the blocking ability, and he obviously tested out of this world. For me, I question his upside as a separator. I think he's definitely a very good testing athlete at his size, but he's a little more lumbering on the field. He doesn't sync very well on transitions and direction changes. He doesn't have great foot speed or flexibility, right? So I want to see him improve in that phase. And, one of his main functions in the NFL is going to be a red zone threat because the dude has a dominant wingspan and catch radius, right? But even then, he's got great play strength, but he can be a clap catcher at times, clapping on the ball, instead of guiding it in with diamond techniques. So I want to see him improve there as well. I think the idea of Darnell Washington is a little bit better than Darnell Washington right now, but still a guy who's worth early round capital. And again, the upside is out of this world. With Mayer, I think you're looking at a lower ceiling than Kincaid. Kincaid, for me, is more explosive, more flexible as a route runner, and he's just flat out one of the most reliable catchers in this draft period. I mean, he extends beyond his frame. The ball is his. Good luck getting it back. But I think Mayer is a little bit younger. He's a better blocker, and he's a more nuanced route runner at this point. Does a little bit better job tempoing his routes, using physicality through stems. So I could see either one of those guys going round one. It might end up being, dependent on the injury concerns. We know Kincaid was battling a back injury, one reason why he didn't test the cycle. He's also a little bit older. He's going to be a 24-year-old rookie. So when they're that close, those factors might separate them and put Mayer ahead. But either one is worth round one capital, in my opinion.
How about Brian Branch? Ian, he's a guy who maybe could be a 30 option. Is that a little too high? Should you try to wait that out into the second round? And do you feel like he would be a good safety choice for them? Because that's an area the Eagles could use some help.
Yeah, I think I don't think it would be too high. I think the question is where you envision Branch playing, because he played primarily in the nickel at Alabama. He can play in space. He can be a too high guy if you want him to. He can roam in the box. He's very, very physical. He's a top 15 player on my board. I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. It's just, where do you envision him playing? Because we know Avonte Maddox takes the slot for the Eagles. Branch was very good in the slot at Alabama. So it's not a position that I want to take him out of. It's one of those things where I do think he can translate in space. He's very explosive. He doesn't have top end speed. He ran a 4.58, I think, and that raised some red flags. But especially at safety, you're not always covering the full field. I don't think you need 4.4 speed if you have explosiveness, and Branch has it. He's very fast closing, and he's very physical. Again, instinctive. He can man up guys with his technique and foot speed, but he's also fluid in space, and he can, channel acceleration through transitions. So I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. It's just a matter of, do you think you can take him out of that role that he played primarily at Alabama, put him into a new role? And I think the inherent versatility that he has is very valuable, right? So if you value that, that's something you could bring in. If he's there at 30, I just think he's the caliber of player that he is. The value would be incredible. So I would be willing to take it for sure. But it's just a matter of, if you do take him, you have to have a vision for him, and you have to make sure that it complements your players.
Do you think there's a better value for the Eagles to stay at 30 or to try to trade it and get more middle round picks? Because let's face it, a lot of good teams really build their teams through the middle rounds of those drafts.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it especially aligns with this draft class because the blue chip tier is not very big, right? Yep. And then the first round tier is not very big. Only 17 players were invited to the NFL draft, which, that in and of itself isn't a representation, but it's, some source material. It tells you, it's a little bit lighter on first round talent. So, again, I think it depends on how the board falls. If a player like Adetomiwa Adebawore from Northwestern is there, he's a player that I would love for the Eagles. I think the alignment versatility, the upside that he provides alongside Jordan Davis, very good, right? So again, it depends on what you do at 10, and it depends on how the board falls at 30. But I do think it is a viable option, and as we mentioned earlier, the Eagles only have 6 picks. They only have, and after 94, there's a big, big gap in that 100 to 200 range where they could get some very good players, right? So, I think in this class especially, and you can get some future capital too. So, I think it is a viable option for the Eagles. Again, see how the board falls, but it's very possible that you could trade down in round 2 and still get a guy like Keanu Benton, who I'm a big fan of for the Eagles as well, or maybe Zach Pickens on the defensive line. So there is value in that top 100 range. And if you can finesse the board the right way, you can come away on top.
How about, go ahead, babe.
I'm sorry. Where do you see this draft, man? Because to me, I'm not going to lie. I think after the top 10 players, I think this is a very average draft at best as far as the talent level that we've seen. This is it seemed like the past 3 or 4 years was unbelievable talented draft, but this to me seems a little a little off for me for some reason. You know, maybe it's just me, or do you see? How do you look at this draft?
Yeah, you know, and I'll preface with this: I haven't been grading for very long, only a couple of years. So, you know, I need a bigger sample size before I can speak on that accurately. But it does feel like it's a little bit weaker, you know. And one thing that me as a draft analyst I try to stick to is you always want to stay outcome independent, right? It may look weaker on the surface, but we could look back 2 to 3 years down the line and there's 10 all pros, like a ton of pro boards. Right? So, you know, you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, looking on the surface, I would say it's a relatively weaker class. You know, I do think there's a silver lining there, not as much blue chip talent up top, but I think the class is incredibly deep in that, say, 50 to 175 range. You know, I think there are a lot of quality players with upside who you can get them late. If you get them in the right situation with the right coaching, you can develop them into something. You know, I do think there's upside there, just a little less certainty, fewer guarantees. And that's
like
scary.
Gibbs. I think Gibbs will be like a struggle.
That's what I was going to follow up with Gibbs. So where are you at with him? And give me a couple guys after him.
Jahmyr Gibbs, you said?
Yeah,
he's my RB2. I'm a big fan. He's a top 20 guy for me. I'm a big fan of his profile. I think, you know, whenever you're looking at a guy who's around 5'9", around 200, right, you know, a little undersized, you want to see if they're that versatile catalyst, that two-phase offense in the offensive side of the ball, and he's definitely that guy. I mean, he's an absolute weapon. His explosiveness is incredible. I mean, he gears up instantly out of transitions, incredibly twitchy, fleet-footed runner with good vision as a ball carrier, but then you look at his receiving work. I mean, this is a guy who can split out wide as a receiver. He can run routes. He can separate independently, and he can make plays beyond his frame. You know, I think this is a guy who's he provides an element for your offense that few do, and I'm a big fan of his. You know, the only reason Bijan is above him is because Bijan is just so complete. You know, he's got that workhorse frame to go along with all that good stuff. But Jahmyr Gibbs is a dynamic catalyst, you know, a very good player. And he's safely my RB2. You know, it's Bijan, then Gibbs, and then a sizable gap. The next guys up, I have Tank Bigsby from Auburn is my RB3, Kendre Miller from TCU, my RB4, Tyjae Spears from Tulane, my RB5. Those are I'm a big fan of all those guys. And this RB class in particular too, man, there's guys outside my top 10 that I like. You know, like I'll say, oh, he's my RB13. It's like, oh, you don't like him then. No, I like him, man. It's just tough to rank these guys. Because
my guy Deuce from Kansas State.
Yeah, exactly. Deuce, man. The size is going to be a big caveat for him, but man, you take the size out of the equation, he's a good player.
Well, how many elite wide receivers are there in this draft? It doesn't appear like there's a lot of surplus and elite potential receivers compared to recent past years.
Yeah, there's no elite receivers in my opinion. I think the top end talent at this receiver class is a little bit, you know, that's kind of where this class sees the hit being taken. But I do think, you know, there are guys with the upside to become elite receiving weapons, right? You know, that's the caveat. You know, there's not any guys that are coming out that are elite, but they could develop into that. I have Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith-Njigba at the top of my board. Smith-Njigba, the only thing, you know, he doesn't have top end speed, right? You know, and that's something that we've known for a while. Right. But I think he has the safest profile. Like, if you want to come out of this receiver class with a phenomenal contributor, with a guy who's not guaranteed, there's no guarantees, but almost guaranteed to be a quality player for you on offense, he's your guy. You know, around 6'1", 200, you know, phenomenal agility, short area twitch. He can separate on a dime, right? And he's got phenomenal catching instincts too with the catch point. So he's one of those guys who's a very, very reliable separator, very reliable at the catch point, and he's a pretty slippery rack threat too. You know, he can create after the catch. So, you know, I think he's a phenomenal receiver prospect. Is he elite? Not quite. You know, I want to see more of a top gear for him. And then Quentin Johnston, you know, 6'3", 206, near 34-inch arms. He's got phenomenal, you know, he's got insane short area agility and flexibility for his size. You don't really see that for bigger receivers, but his hand technique as a pass catcher can improve. He can still refine his route tree a little bit more. So, you know, there's questions with these guys, but again, it kind of aligns with my previous answer to, you know, the draft class as a whole. There is upside. It's just a matter of honing that upside.
You worry at all, just to circle back to the quarterbacks, and this is not an Eagle question, it's just a general question. Derek and I were, and Barrett as well, but we were talking about this the other day. For a minute, we were kind of back and forth and worried about Bryce Young's size. But ultimately, you just watch the film, and there's just too many plays made to pass up on him. Do you worry about that? And do you think he's a lock to go to Carolina first?
Yeah, you know, I'll answer the second one real quick first. I'm not sure he's a lock, right? You know, I do think it shifted very quickly, the narrative, right? At first it was like maybe CJ Stroud, maybe Richardson, maybe Levis, and now all of a sudden Young is almost guaranteed. You know, as a draft analyst, again, never say guaranteed. We'll never know. It reminds me a little bit of 2018. You know, sometimes some people thought it was going to be Sam Darnold, maybe Josh Allen, right? And then all of a sudden, the final day, Baker Mayfield ends up being the guy. So, you know, the draft has a way of surprising you, so you always want to stay on your toes. at this point, peer pressure is strong though. So if you ask me to make a decision, I'd say maybe Young. Maybe it's Young right now. I don't think we know. But I think the S2 cognitive test, all the buzz around that is very valuable, because you look on the tape and you mentioned it, Bryce Young, he's undersized, right? He doesn't have a great arm. I think of the top quarterbacks, he has the weakest arm, but his processing ability, his ability to quickly react and kind of survey what's in front of him and diagnose, and then kind of act on that as well, create for himself and pull his team out of chaotic situations and stay calm under pressure. I mean, there's no quarterback that has that kind of ability like Bryce Young in this class. I mean, he's so good at staying composed amidst chaotic situations and coming out on top. I think the ability to create, extend plays, evade rushers, and keep his eyes downfield, the vision to, make plays happen in those situations, it's something that he has that's not very common. You don't see it very often. So I think the more concerning thing for me, more than the size, is the lacking arm talent. I do think he has good arm talent, above average, but it's not at the level where he can force velocity, push passes into tight windows downfield. But I do think he has enough to layer throws. So, I think he has enough. I think he has enough to counteract that and ultimately become a franchise QB.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Ian.
Right.
You guys got anything else for Ian before
That's
we,
it, man.
wow. Wrap it?
Amazing.
All right.
You're very thorough, man. You're very thorough, man. Very thorough.
Appreciate the knowledge, man. And again, tell everybody, you can follow Ian on Twitter at @IC_draft, and all your work, PFN 365. Anything particular you want to promote, Ian?
No, man, just the Twitter handle, PFN 365 is Pro Football Network. Yeah, it's going to be a fun week, man. We got 1 week left to go, and then keep an eye out for the 2024 cycle. We've got 2024 content coming already. We've got a big board coming. Yeah, that's going to be a fun class, by the way. Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, Caleb Williams is the headliner, but
some of the quarterbacks.
Drake May as well. There's a lot of guys with upside too. Quinn Ewers, JJ McCarthy,
Caleb Williams.
If they can take the leap, right? So a lot of talent on the board, and it's going to be exciting. The draft never sleeps, man. We keep going, so it'll be a fun one. But I appreciate you guys having me on. It's a great time. Always fun talking draft.
All right, Ian. Thanks, man.
Thank you,
Appreciate
man.
it. Take care. That's Ian Cummings, Pro Football Network 365. Yeah, great stuff, man. That was good. That was fun. I like jumping around a little bit like that. That's for sure. All right, let's keep it rolling because we come back. We'll continue talking NFL. Mark Jackson of NBC Sports Philadelphia is going to join us at 2:00. But when we come back, guys, Tom Brady was asked point blank, if there's any chance he could play for the Dolphins. We'll tell you what he said when we get back, among other things. We're going to rank our NFC quarterbacks as well. So we got a lot of stuff to do when we return. So don't go anywhere. We are Sports Take, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. That's Derek. That's Barrett. I'm Rob. Let's talk right now about Pro Action Restoration. Pro Action Restoration is the place that you reach out to if your home, your business, a property you may own, goes through the pain and inconvenience of water, fire, smoke, mold damage. You name it. We know how trying that can be. Pro Action Restoration is on call 24 hours, 7 days a week to assist. I can tell you that personally because I reached out to them on a Saturday at my parents' house, and they got right out there, and it couldn't have been a better experience. The crew was professional. They cleaned it up. The price was reasonable. You name it, all the boxes were checked. They are licensed, bonded, fully insured. They've been serving the tri-state area for more than 2 decades. Pro Action Restoration will work in conjunction with your insurance company. So again, water, fire, smoke, mold damage, you name it, they can handle it. Give them a call. And if you're not really sure, they're there for a consultation. 610-623-3760, 610-623-3760, or online at proactionrestoration.com. That's proactionrestoration.com.